Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. I'm your host, Christine Devlin Eck. Here at the Center for Sacred Window Studies, we explore and expand on conscious postpartum care. We navigate the overlap of caring for others and caring for ourselves. We honor the transitions, not only in giving birth, but in being alive. Welcome to the conversation.
And I will never be the same again.
Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. I'm delighted to dive into postpartum nutrition and eating a little deeper today. I connected with Christa De Ridder recently. Christa is living in Vancouver. She's from the Netherlands, and she's really, really dedicated her Ayurvedic work towards food and eating and helping and supporting people to find the ways that food can be medicine for them. She's the founder of Sage and Saints Ayurveda. And we thought we would dive into a little bit of the real everyday common struggles that people have, not just postpartum people, but honestly, anybody in, busy life phase where perhaps we have like short windows of time to eat, we're grabbing things quick, we're not being intentional. And I will say I am a forever student of Ayurveda. I work with people, and this is also part of my reality of trying to figure out how to give myself what it needs um, in short windows of time. And then when we add on difficult, you know, seasons of life where like we we really need the support, and it's easy to have poor food combining, especially in our Western culture where we don't know what is a poor food combination. So I'm excited, Christa, and I'm so grateful to you for coming on to chat with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So, I know that this is a big part of what you do when you work with clients, but, you know, I guess, you know, overall, when people are trying to be conscious about the way that they eat, and we live in the real world where we can't
Mhm.
consciously spend hours cooking our food every day,
Yeah.
uh, you know, in general, what are some things that you recommend that people do?
hmm Yeah, no, that's a really good point. You always kind of want to see where a person is at. There are clients that I work with who love to cook and they enjoy trying new recipes and maybe difficult recipes. And then there's lots of people who maybe don't feel so comfortable in the kitchen or don't like to be in the kitchen that much. Or, like you say, just have very busy lives and cooking or taking care of themselves in that way is just not necessarily a top priority in their lives. Maybe they want it to be that way, but it's just not always the case. And that's difficult. So really looking where you are at and then making incremental small adaptations to things to make sure that it sticks, because we don't want to jump in with lofty goals and then maybe do that for a few weeks and then kind of like fall off the wagon, because we've probably all been there and that's not a fun experience. So just small incremental changes can have big benefit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wholeheartedly believe that, digestible, no pun intended, but like, you know, if we try to commit to something that's too complicated, it's not going to be maintained.
Yeah.
Um, so, thinking about like a good first step for
Mhm.
people, and I'm conscious of like just time and also bandwidth. Like I think people,
For
even
sure.
if, it's not only just I don't have the time, like I don't have the energy to,
For sure. That's a big one.
so um yeah, what is like digestible first steps for us when we're feeling like
Yeah. No, that's a really good one. I think the energy level is often at play of like the end of the day, and then you're gonna have to cook a meal and you're like, oh, I just don't have the energy. And then it's easy to maybe get a frozen pizza or something very simple. Which, there's nothing wrong with that if that's every once in a while, for sure. Um, but I think a good first step is to look at if you can bring some structure and some routine in this. Because I know myself, if I don't plan anything for that week, if I don't do like my groceries well, so there's nothing in my fridge, that often leads to a week of, making eggs on a sandwich or like these quick type of meals. And when I do plan and I do make a grocery list and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make these 3 recipes this week, and I divide it between me and my partner, I don't do everything alone, then I always notice this week goes way better. And it's not actually that much of a burden because I know what day I'm cooking, I know what I'm cooking, I have the ingredients in the house, and it makes it a lot easier for me. So I would suggest looking at that to bring some sort of structure, and it can be very minimal. Just pick maybe one thing you're going to cook that week, and then make a grocery list and do the groceries, and then plan when you're going to cook.
I love the intentionality behind that
Hmm.
because then
Yeah,
also, I mean, I find myself personally in a place where I'm kind of going day by day
yeah,
sometimes because that's just the space that I am with my family at this moment in time. But when I am able to be intentional about the week ahead, it feels so, it's almost like part of the hurdle is just trying to
mhm.
figure out what we're going to make.
Yeah, yeah. That's
If
always a big
that
one.
part's already decided, uh,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
more enjoyment about it and
Hmm.
a
Yeah,
freer attention about
yeah,
it.
yeah. I agree. Yeah, I think that's and it's sometimes difficult for people to get to that point to like kind of sit down and take a moment of like, okay, what am I gonna eat? What do I have in my pantry already? What do I need to buy? But that usually takes maybe 30 minutes, not even, and then you have the benefit of it the next week. So it's a little bit of that hurdle of sitting down and doing it first, but then, like with everything, you start to create a routine and it becomes kind of part of your week. Um, and it would be really great if you can do it on a specific day. So Saturday morning, you sit down, okay, what am I going to cook? Make the grocery list, go to the grocery store, and then maybe on Sunday or whatever day works for you, you do a little bit of meal prep maybe, and then you're set up for the week. And it really doesn't have to take long. It can be very, very small amount of time.
And what's cool is like that routine piece of it is part of the fix, you know?
Mhm.
It's like anything that we can do that gives us a routine, a groundedness, helps to benefit that feeling of I'm rushed,
Right.
I don't have time for this. Like that little act is
Hmm.
part of the medicine. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so of course we're benefiting from the food and the meals that are more intentionally thought out, but we're also benefiting from that
Yeah.
feeling of security that
Mhm.
we're okay there. And
Yeah.
I'm like hearing my sister's voice in my mind because she has this phrase of like, this is a gift to my future self. And I love that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
whenever I like take a minute to like do something that's going to
Yeah.
bring ease in
Mhm.
the next, however long, I'm always like, oh, it's a present to my future self.
Yeah.
Um, so
No, I
that
love that. Yeah, because a lot of people see cooking and all everything around it as a chore. It's like something on my to-do list. But if you just shift your mind to this is actually an act of self-care for myself and for my family, then sometimes that can bring more attention and more intention and priority to it as well.
Yeah, I love that. And
Mhm.
I'm, also thinking about um for me, like I do have a good amount of cooking experience. It's more of a time issue, but also when I think about, and we'll kind of get into the specifics about postpartum and eating and setting ourselves up for success. But I'm curious if you have like a favorite go-to quick meal that's like
Mm.
super nourishing? And like right now, like we both live in cold places. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna like use this example to be
Yeah.
for winter,
Mhm.
What is your favorite
I
quick
think
go?
I have two favorites. One is like a lentil soup. And I mean, it still takes about 30 minutes to make, but it's very quickly put everything in a pot, add some water, stock, and then let it go. And it's just so nourishing. And if you make a bigger batch, you can eat the whole week. Maybe you can put some in your freezer, or you can at least feed your family with it for sure. And definitely in the wintertime is such a nourishing meal. And most of the time, I mean, it really depends on what someone's pantry looks like, but I feel I always have most of the ingredients. You have dried lentils, you have some vegetable stock cubes or chicken stock cubes, and then you always have like an onion or a carrot in your fridge. And that's basically it. It's so easy. Put a little bit of spicing in, and it's so nourishing and just really good for you, especially postpartum as well, and also in the winter time. Um, and another one, which I'm sure people are going to think this is way too difficult, but what I love to do in the winter is make braised meat. And I can tell you that it's quicker almost than the lentil soup. It takes a few hours, but literally you put everything in a pan, you put it in the oven, it takes 3 hours, and you go do the vacuuming, the laundry, whatever you need to do. Or it's like one of these things that is so delicious if you obviously eat meat, and so nourishing, especially in wintertime or in times where you feel depleted. And it's much easier than it sounds. Um, so those are really my favorite go-tos. If I really have like only 10 minutes, I just fry up some eggs on nice, good quality bread, put some spices on the eggs, and I have my quick lunch, for example. That's a
Mm.
really quick one.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
such an egg person too. And I
Yeah.
also love, with braised meat, that's such an like it's so diverse, like what you
Yeah.
can do along with that. And I
Sure.
think for, thinking about postpartum or times where, we're depleted or our digestion isn't awesome, putting that in broth, putting it in soup
Yeah.
and having it be really soft and hydrating.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think, for me too, when I'm envisioning like making the lentil soup,
Mhm.
and I find that like for me and to like combat the demands of a busy life or like a healing window, let's say, being able to do some kind of meditation, some kind of centering is like really a non-negotiable part of my day because it's what gives me the stamina to show up in the ways that I
Yeah.
need to show up. But for me, like meal prep, I
Mhm.
can slip into like a meditative
Mhm.
space.
Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
am chopping onions or carrots or stirring soup or like washing lentils. Like that whole process
Yeah.
can come like I'm breathing. And this is, amidst like my kids probably like yelling and needing
Yeah.
me or like something's going awry. Like it's real. Like I'm not,
Mhm. For sure.
always
Yeah.
able to do that, but I'll often like put on music when I'm cooking or light a candle, something that like invites it to be more than a let's get through this so that I can just eat and go on with my day or my evening
Mhm. Yeah.
to um a much more whole experience of it
Mhm. Yeah.
uh, that then can benefit me moving forward because all of a sudden I've like regulated myself in a
Yeah.
way that
Mhm.
like, and honestly, for like multitaskers out there, like you're, centering yourself and you're cooking food at the same time. But as folks who really believe in food as medicine know what we put into our food intentionally, you know, energetically is really important. So
Hmm.
when we're cooking, why not allow that to be a process of love that helps
Yeah, I love
benefit us
that.
too on a subtle level?
It's so true. Yeah, it is true. And what I hear you say, it's a lot about kind of calming the nervous system in that moment because you probably come in all heightened and like, oh my gosh, I have to cook. What am I cooking? Kids running around. There's a lot to do. And if you're able to ground yourself and calm your nervous system, I mean, that benefits not only yourself, but that benefits your kids as well because you are moving calmer through the kitchen. Plus, it benefits your digestion. You go sit down to eat the meal and you're more calm. It benefits your digestion massively. I think the stress is one of the biggest things why people have digestive issues. So if you're able to do that, that's a big win. I agree. That's massive.
Huge. Yeah, I didn't even, of course, like that is setting you up to really receive the nutrients of the
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
uh, to process it and have your body get what you wanted to get out of it and
Yeah.
not struggle.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so cool.
And it's also like the routine of that is also so good for the whole household. You know, obviously kids thrive on routine, but not just kids, we as well, as adults. And if you're able to set some sort of routine in the house around meal times, um, that just benefits the whole family. And again, the routine is so big in Ayurveda. I know we always talk about it. Like the first thing I work on with clients is the mealtime routine, you know, and then after that, we'll talk about what you're eating and the food, because it just has such a massive impact on your physical and mental well-being. And especially if you're in a family, the routine is just so good for the kids. It just calms everyone down.
right, which
Yeah.
then like ripples out to behavior and
Yes, for
communication
sure. Yeah.
and sleep and
Hmm.
all of the things
Everything.
that,
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
us feel good and successful in our day.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, so looking kind of into the window of, a postpartum person, a postpartum family who's, you know, ideally, we don't want the person who gave birth to be up and cooking their own food.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they are.
Mhm.
Oftentimes they're home by themselves with
Mhm.
their baby. They're trying to take care of their baby.
Yeah.
They, are sitting down to nurse a lot. And as soon as they sit down, they realize they're starving or they're like so thirsty. They've never been more thirsty in their lives. I don't know why
Yeah.
it's like that, but
Yeah.
the second your baby starts to nurse, you're like dying of thirst. And
Mhm.
it's hard to be the person that is thinking ahead to make sure you have what you need, which is
For
why
sure.
postpartum support is so important, to let that person heal and focus on their baby and their, body rejuvenating. And then we can provide all of the nourishment that needs to happen.
Mhm.
However, we all live kind of in the real world here, and we need to
Yeah.
realize that not everybody is going to have that support.
Yeah.
So, I think when we're in that kind of a scenario, what are some ways that people can set them up for success, set themselves up
Mhm.
for success, whether it's like having things made ahead of time that, aren't going to lose their, vibrational benefit that are, um,
Yeah.
what are some like a few
Yeah.
really good ways that we can avoid that kind of situation where we're just grabbing at anything cold in the fridge
Yeah.
because it's what we can sit down with and eat in
Yeah.
5 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, if you can plan ahead, that's obviously the ideal situation, and you can do that in multiple times, or in multiple ways. I think asking for help is a huge one. Asking friends, family to bring you meals. If that's not an option, maybe beforehand you can stock your freezer as much as you can with just like one-off portions or two, so that you have a meal to put out in the morning to defrost, and then you can have that for dinner. I think that's ideal so that you have food around you basically, and it's not an empty fridge situation. if that is also not an option, then I would look at having things around like maybe fruits. Dry fruits is also an option, like dates, for example, or dried figs have a lot of nourishment in them. They're usually recommended for postpartum and for like vata depletion. So, it's obviously you're going to snack on certain food. It's not just going to be fully prepped meals. So having that around, I think, is also helpful. Having a big bottle of water or someone who can make tea for you, that would be really helpful. Um, Things like that. So that I think it is a little bit of planning and also not being afraid to ask for help. I think a lot of people struggle with that part as well. And I think a lot, if someone would actually had someone, I ran like a weekly meal service once where I cooked for a couple of people during the pandemic. And I had someone who was expecting and she ordered like a lot of food from me. And I was just so happy to be able to provide that for her for this specific situation that when she gave birth, she had all this food in her freezer, really nicely cooked meals. So I know it was kind of like my business, but even if she asked me that out of a friend, it would be my honor to cook for someone who's in that situation. So sometimes we think like asking for help is like burdening someone else, but it's often the opposite. It's really nice to help someone in that situation, no?
I love that. I love that that's your, main first thing is
Yeah,
for help, because it is like there's always that hesitation to do it, and yet that's exactly what needs to happen. And folks are happy
yeah, for sure.
to help. Yeah. And I think, you know, fruits are so great. I think, in postpartum, like the more that we can hydrate things, the
Yeah,
better. So like I used to put like dried prunes and dried dates into, like, just pour hot water over them
yeah,
and just let them
I
get
do.
super, super soft and mushy,
Yeah,
and like eat
yeah,
it like that.
yeah.
Or I'd put like raisins in the milk tonic
Hmm.
so that
Yeah, it's great
it all
also for
soaks
iron. Yeah,
up. And, um,
yeah,
yeah, so that was, I feel like the milk tonics for me became a really important snack. It
yeah,
was like an
yeah,
easy way to hydrate, but also to get that protein in support of my own lactation.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because we say in Ayurveda it's kind of a vata phase, right? After you gave birth, because it's such a big depletion, and then you're breastfeeding, so you're depleting even more while you have to nourish yourself again. So it's kind of a double whammy. And you're totally right. Like foods to nourish someone are like the heavier foods that we know of. So the dairy products, the protein, like the meats and the eggs and things like that, that have a lot of protein and fats and substance in them. So they give you a ton of energy and they work with the depletion and nourish you back into vitality, basically. So those are definitely great things to eat. Even things like yogurt and milk. I know milk is often a topic is talked about a lot. But if you can digest it and you feel good with it, it's a great food to eat after giving birth for sure. Because it's so like think your baby is obviously drinking milk and growing up on that. So the same goes for a human, and we might not always need that. But if we're in a depletion phase, it can be very beneficial.
yeah, when I think of, easy, and the good news about postpartum cooking is that it's the simpler the better, really,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
our digestion is just building back up.
yeah,
It's our Agni, our digestive fire is very, very low.
yeah.
So, what we need are really mushy, soupy,
Mm. Yeah.
soft with some good spices and some good fats, and like
Mhm.
a small amount kind of growing into a larger amount when our
Yeah.
Agni handle it, but it's
Mhm.
not difficult. And I think that's a bit of a misconception about, cooking for postpartum. It's actually very, very easy.
Mhm.
Like, let's just
For
soak some
sure.
even like really soupy oatmeal,
Yeah,
some
it's
goji berries and some,
yeah,
cinnamon and cardamom,
yeah,
that's very, very fast
yeah,
to make.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I always love to make like the overnight version. And then you can heat it up in the morning. You can warm it up in a pan, and it's very quick and very nourishing. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 And the simple is really good because we don't want to overload the system because then it's hard to digest. Like you say, the Agni is very weak and very low. So it's really also good to, every person is different with that as well, of course. It also depends on what you've been eating before that. I definitely not recommend to change your diet in this phase at all. Like don't go like vegan or something if you're used to eating meat or vice versa. But being very mindful and gentle on digestion is definitely good. And depends on what season you're in, but mostly that is like all the soupy food. Yeah, like the lentil soup would be amazing if you are able to digest lentils, if that's something you normally eat. Um, all the soft things, all the oily, liquidy things. If you are into ghee, that would be good and like small, like you say, you don't want to like all of a sudden add that to your diet if you're not used to it, but that can be very nourishing as well.
And I think before we started recording, we were kind of chatting about, um, the seasonality, and I think we have a lot of guidance just in nature, where we live, what we're doing.
Yeah,
But I also want to acknowledge that most of us growing up in Western culture did not get the memo about, foods that don't go well together, foods
yeah.
that, um, will cause digestive discomfort. We may
Mhm.
have learned the hard way in various situations, but that is so notable about eating Ayurvedically, which ultimately just means eating efficiently as humans can digest food. Like there are
Yeah.
certain, you know, ways according to the laws of nature with which we can best digest our food. And of course, acknowledging the foundation of Ayurveda that all disease begins in the gut.
Mhm.
We take
Yeah.
care of our gut, everything else works better. So in the
Mhm.
postpartum window, when our digestion typically is very slow, very low, we're building it back up.
Yeah.
When we can do that by putting the right things in our body, not only will we heal quicker, more
Mhm.
completely, our babies will feel better because if they're nursing, they're getting everything that we're getting. If we're getting constipated, chances are they're getting constipated.
Yeah.
But, when you begin working with people who don't know really what Ayurvedic food principles are, how do
Yeah.
you help them start with something like poor food combinations and good food combinations?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's something that I see a lot, and you are definitely right. We don't really address that in Western health, how to combine food and even sometimes like how to put a plate together. Obviously, we talk a lot about, protein, carbohydrates, fats, fiber, and vitamins and minerals, but what does that really look like on a plate? And sometimes, even in our Western sort of health culture, we can really obsess with one of these food groups. And some people can go really to the extreme of maybe even weighing their food or avoiding, this is very popular as well, of avoiding complete food groups, which I honestly never recommend unless, you have some sort of allergy or something like that, or you have a specific health issue going on where that might be needed. But for most people, that's not the case. So I would really, look at how we're putting a plate together and trying not to avoid any food group and bringing in all these food group from a Western perspective. That's kind of where I sometimes start, depending on where the person is. Just really making a full meal that a lot of people don't do because it's just grabbing a few things together. And another thing is also cooking. because a lot of people put together a plate of food. Like there's, for example, salad and crackers and a few slices of cheese. That's not necessarily considered in Ayurveda a meal, because we haven't cooked anything of it, and it's just a food put together on one plate. So looking at how do we cook a full meal, and that can look in very different, it depends on what cultural background you have. I know Ayurveda is often associated with Indian food, but it doesn't have to look like that at all. It can be Italian or Asian or whatever it looks like, for you, whatever you prefer to eat. Um, but then, I would really suggest moving towards cooking your food and eating warmer food versus eating a lot of cold food. I know, like in diet culture, salads are like the god. But actually, often the opposite happens with that. It interferes with digestion because we want to keep digestion kind of warm and moist. And when we eat a lot of these raw foods like salads or even sometimes a raw apple, can really interfere. Some people feel bloated afterwards or gassy, and they think I'm eating healthy, right? I'm eating lettuce and maybe raw tomatoes and cucumbers and apples, but that kind of thing can be really difficult to digest and cause digestive issues. I used to eat like that too, and I think like I eat healthy. Like how am I having digestive issues when I'm eating all this health food? So it's a very different perspective on what healthy eating is versus in the West, what we think healthy eating is. So the first thing I always recommend to people is move away from raw food. Move away from kind of the summer type of foods, like lots of salads. Also, usually when we have a salad, there's a lot of ingredients. There's maybe chicken and croutons and cranberries and grapes and nuts and whatever everyone puts. So the more ingredients you put in there, the more difficult it is to digest as well. So moving away more from summer foods to foods that are more cooked and put together well, basically. That's usually the first thing that I work with people, because then you get into the realm of like the soups and the pastas with the sauces and the more nourishing and easier to digest foods.
Yeah, for me, I think Ayurveda became a much more simple and accessible concept when I started really just looking at the qualities
Yeah.
and what are the qualities that I need right now. It's vata time of life right now with, postpartum is a very high vata time of life. And
Yeah.
so foods that are warm, that are mushy, that are oily, that are soft. And if it doesn't check those boxes, like really minimizing that and
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing that, even something like a cup of broth, like really
Mhm.
good
Yeah.
quality broth
Yeah.
is
It's easy.
is something that is immediately accessible.
Yeah.
We need hydration, we need the building of digestive fire, we need
Mhm.
um calming of the nervous system. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anything kind of crunchy and cold and rough and astringent, those things will just create higher vata. And that's such a beautiful way to guide what it is that we eat, is looking at
Mhm.
what are our specific body's needs. And I think that, that's kind of getting back to how our culture doesn't prioritize or have that kind of information available to us. That's where people like you are just really instrumental in helping us to set and create the routines that we need to feel empowered by our food choices. Because ultimately, creating commitment to the way that we have a relationship with food, we need it
Mhm.
continuously every
Yeah.
day. We're never going to not need our food.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and also just honoring, it seems to me like a beautiful way to honor the different phases of our life with,
Mhm.
okay, well, you know,
Yeah.
acknowledging that through the types of foods that we get the opportunity to cook and eat.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so beautiful. And I think all of us have actually that innate wisdom within us. But we're so focused on having external resources tell us what to eat. But if we really are still and connect with our bodies and feel into what we want, I think we hardly ever choose a salad. Maybe when we're in the height of summer, there's nothing that, not that salad is a bad food necessarily, but I think often women are kind of indoctrinated a little bit that that is the food that we should be eating, light foods and things like that. But most of the time, we need to be nourished and we're hungry. And that's a good thing. If you have strong hunger, that's really good. And often those things are also said they are bad. If you are hungry, you should suppress it. You should drink water. No, no, you should eat when you're hungry. So, food is such a huge concept. It's not just about what we're eating, but we all have this huge relationship and background with food. And I think that's really good to also take that into consideration when you are looking to maybe eat healthier or whatever your goal is. Like, what is your relationship with food? Because that is usually a big struggle besides what we eat. Because I do, like, again, I do feel that we have this innate kind of compass that is aligned with the seasons and nature. We still run on a circadian rhythm, even though we live in concrete cities. It's still how we operate. And if we are able to more get back into that connection, which is not always easy, um, then we can trust ourselves as well of what we should be eating in certain phases and certain times of our lives.
Mm, so beautiful. I really appreciate that. I
Hmm.
really appreciate the guidance that you're giving people. And I know that part of your work is really about helping people to work on that relationship with their
Yeah,
food. And that's
yeah.
really powerful.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, Krista, I'm so grateful to you for coming here. Is there anything you wanted to share in closing?
Um, yeah, I'm super grateful to be here as well. It's so fun to talk about this and important. I think you're doing such great work with this as well. And I just want to empower people as well that they know what they need and they can trust themselves in um, knowing what they need and give it to themselves as well. Um, yeah, I think building trust with yourself is such a big piece of this.
Mm, Thank you so much. I'm going to
Mhm.
have information on Krista in the show notes here so you can make sure to follow her and use her as a resource in your own journey and that of others you know. Um, Krista, it's a pleasure, such a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Shanti, Shanti.
The Sacred Window podcast is brought to you by the Center for Sacred Window Studies. You can visit us to find out more about our online training and mentoring programs, plus resources and products for and about the sacred postpartum window at www.sacredwindowstudies.com. And our music is written and performed by Sarah Emmett. You can hear more of Sarah's music by visiting www.sarahemmett.bandcamp.com.